Okay, thank you so much for having me. My name is Elena Churilova, and I'm the founder of Ophi. Ophi is basically a chatbot for the office. You can ask Ophi to schedule your meetings, to take care of your expenses, I don't know, to take a present for one of your coworkers, anything that you like. And today I want to talk to you about how human you actually would like to build your bots. Okay, great. So before coming to Vienna, so the bot is actually being built in Berlin. And before I came to Berlin, I actually lived in Japan for quite some time. And I would like to start this speech with a story of when I was in line to meet with the humanoids. Just to clarify, the humanoid is this person, not this person. That's the creator of the humanoid. What is a humanoid? A humanoid, essentially, it's a robot that really looks like a person, right? And I was in line, and in front of me there was this little kid, and what he was essentially doing is he was like very fidgeting, like very nervous, and he was like pulling onto the skirt of his mother and asking, is this real? And since I really like trolling kids, I replied and I said yes. It's a real human being. It's a real robot. It lives, it works, and it lives. Why I'm telling you the story is not because I want to tell you that I scare kids and I make them cry. It's because that was really the first time that I questioned myself, why are we actually building robots and computers that look, act, and look like us, right? So the kid is fine. He then went to look at this robot, Asimo, which is like hops on one leg, and the interaction was quite good. Sorry, 1 second. So, yeah, next slide. So, coming to today, I'm building this chatbot. And one thing that we had to consider for Ophi is what type of personality we'd like to build for Ophi. Since this is a chatbot that will be interacting with every office worker, it's a question that came to my mind of like, how human do I want Ophi to be? After all, we humans are quite imperfect, right? But still we want Ophi to learn from us. So I was wondering whether there was some kind of like moral framework, some kind of guideline to design chatbots that would teach me and help me design this chatbot without seeping in the not nice aspects of humanity. Oh, thank you. So, sorry, 1 second. So you see, actually, there's research that have been done on this topic, so it's not the only one, I wasn't the only one who was asking this question. And so far, Nas and Youngmi are two Stanford professors who've been doing a lot of studies about this topic. And you see, bots are really intriguing because they're social technology, and they're actually able to push our social buttons, and they're actually able to create a partnership and a relationship with us, right? And what I mean by social buttons is that, if they learn from us, if we design these bots to communicate with us using the same language and the same social cues, then what happens is that these bots and what happens that these people, we people, are going to behave the same way that we behave with other people. And so that's what Nas and Youngmi proved in 2000 when he demonstrated that this is exactly what's happening. So this theory was first coined in the late 90s, actually, this concept, but it's ever more relevant today when we're developing chatbots, because it's not only creating a huge amount of opportunities in the computer-human interaction space, but it's actually also creating a lot of problems. So what do I mean by that? Well, I actually mean two things. When people interact with each other, we usually bring, our biases and our stereotypes into the conversation, right? So if this theory holds true, what actually is happening is that the same biases and stereotypes leak into the conversation with the bots, right? So maybe you're a little bit puzzled of like, why are we talking about this, since you came here to learn more about how to build chatbots and how to do fun technologies. Well, the reason why I'm telling you this is because, next slide, because it matters for three specific reasons. The first one, of course, is because it actually affects the bottom line of your chatbot. So if you're building a chatbot and you're trying to make a business out of it, it does have effects on your bottom line. Second reason, it actually affects us as a society entirely. And third, which is the most important and the one that I'm most worried about, is actually the repercussions on the future technology that we're going to be developing. Okay, so computers actually, they don't just come biased of their own. They're actually learning from us, from our human-like traits. Sorry. Yeah. And for years, the vanguard of computer science has been teaching programs to learn similar to how we learn, which is observing the world and seeing the patterns in the world, similar to how this image is showing. And actually, there was a really cool experiment that Google has done in 2012. So the researchers have actually fed their computer brain millions of images from YouTube videos to see what it would recognize. And what happened is that it responded with black and white shadows similar to this, if you see, of people and cats. So the researchers have not shown any face, like they have not described what a face looks like and what a cat looks like, but for some reason the technology has learned exactly those two things without any of our guidance. So what we teach to our bots is very important. And let's take, for example, the infamous Tay. How many of you have heard about Tay before? Okay, great. By the way, did you know that the acronym means thinking about you? No? Okay. Well, a fun fact. So for those of you who don't know what Tay is, it's basically a chatbot AI designed by Microsoft, and it was launched on Twitter. And Tay was designed not only to learn dynamically from human interaction, but also to simulate the linguistic capabilities of a teenage American girl. So that design premise should have already sent red lights, but so for some reason, the design team decided to go ahead and push the project. So when Tay was unleashed onto Twitter, especially what happened is that the worst that you could imagine happened. Tay learned from humans, and in less than 24 hours, it has become a monster. It became a sexist, a Nazi sympathizer, and a monster, essentially. So Microsoft had to take Tay down, and they came back with a second version of it after they put some safeguards and some filters, which was marginally better, but still they had to take it off because it was saying how it was proud that it was taking drugs in front of cops. So next slide. So the Tay debacle essentially it's a mind-blowing and eye-opening experiment of the dynamics between machine learning, culture, language, and social interaction. And the episodes also puts to rest the question of whether AI can mimic the worst aspects of humanity. Next slide. But you see, like, we humans have been striving to create these machine-like, human-like machines for a very, very long time. And in fact, the first humanoid automata was found in the scripts in 3rd century BC. Apparently, there was this really cool merchant, Yan Shi. He went to this king, Mu of Zhu. Sorry if anyone is Chinese here and I'm mispronouncing the names. So he went there with his latest invention, which was like a human-shaped leather person with organs mimicking the human organs, and somehow it was moving. I would assume it was some kind of marionette. And then you can see in 1495, this is Leonardo da Vinci's robot, which is considered the first real kind of robot, and it was also able to move. So technology since then has been advancing a lot, and machine learning has advanced, natural language processing has been advanced, but the most complex fact is actually building conversations. Not only because it's hard to teach to the computers, but because we're actually really bad at making conversations ourselves. Next slide. And because of that, I actually want to tell you a short story about Brian Christian. Does anyone know Brian Christian here? Okay, great. He's basically the author of The Most Human Human. And do you know what a Turing test is? Okay, perfect. So essentially, in 2009, they were really, really close for having a bot passing the Turing test, and he was really uncomfortable with that because he was saying we're far away from that technology. So he applied to be part of the Turing test in 2009 to prevent that from happening. And so when he applied and he wanted to be part of it, he went to the judge to get advice of how to be human because he thought it was more complicated than it was. But the advice that he received from the judges was essentially to just be yourself. So he was really unhappy with that answer because, well, he thought that we were too overconfident about our ability to be human. And that's because, think about it, he had to do a conversation, but we actually have specialists who train us to do speeches, to do negotiations, to talk romantically. So if we have so much trouble talking ourselves, it's not natural even for us, right? So he decided to train himself. He's like, okay, I'm not just going to be myself. I'm going to go and look at the scripts, see exactly what happens, and see how I can become better. So what he found was actually quite amusing, because what he found was that computers were really focused on charming the judges. They were like putting smiley faces and LOLs here and there, while people were terrible at the conversation making. They were even apologetic. So he found quotes where the user was saying, "I'm sorry for being so banal and boring during this conversation." So the reason why I said about this is because, you know, if we're teaching computers and we're bad at it, next slide, yeah. The question comes to mind, is it even wise for us to build machines based on the human model? And there's actually two fields of study, one who say it's wise and the ones who say not wise. The one who say not wise, they're basically saying it because they say our language is very complex and we have different forms of communication among ourselves, you know, which differ due to age or status or gender. And some prefer, you know, like tough love talk. Some prefer, on the other hand, to rent someone with. It's very, very complex. And the main problem is that for chatbot to show correct emotions for different situations, it would need to have the ability to decipher accurately the emotional code. And this is yet impossible to do with technology. So some say that perhaps we should be focusing on doing intelligent AI and not trying to teach it conversations, but maybe do something better with the technology. And then on the other side, there's once again Reeves and Ness, the Stanford professors, who say no. If you're imagining a world where humans and computers are interacting and living in harmony, you really have to teach computers to behave more and be like humans. Okay, and there's actually it's actually innate to us to ascribe human-like qualities to objects, and there's actually a term for it. It's called anthropomorphism. It's a bit of a tongue twister, but I hope I'm not gonna say it wrong throughout the presentation. And essentially what that means is, yes, we ascribe human-like elements to a lot of technologies, a lot of computer systems, and even Earth. If you think about it, we call the planet Mother Earth, right? And interestingly enough, it actually changes our behavior and the way we see the world. A good example of this is there was a law that was passed in Spain where captive chimpanzees were granted human rights based on anthropomorphism. And now it's the video. I wanted to show you a video. This is essentially an experiment that they did with fast food drive-in people. Maybe some of you have already seen this.
I am I-O.
What's your name again?
I-O-O-O-O-O-O. O-O-O-O. I-O.
This confuses me.
Hello.
Okay, we can stop it here.
Artificial intelligence.
So basically, the reason why I wanted to show you this video is because apparently there's a threshold between how comfortable we are with AI and technology in general. And this brings me to my next slide, which is talking about, that one, yeah, next one, yeah, the Uncanny Valley theory. Have you heard about this before? Yes? Okay, great. You're so smart. Yay. So basically, for those of you who don't know, it's a non-linear relationship between a robot's degree of anthropomorphism and its likability. So essentially, the more we have human-like but not really like human characteristics in our technology, the more people feel scared and uncomfortable with technology. So what that means for us, essentially, if we create a robot that is 100% human-like, we're going to like him. If we create a robot like the one in Tokyo, the reason why the kid was scared is because it was, you know, in this spectrum over here. Next slide. So anyways, how do we build human-like bots? The first thing that we should at least start with is gender. And among all cues related to humanity, gender seems to be fundamentally of importance to us, specifically of importance. And because it's actually the first visual information that we get when we interact with people. And maybe you have heard a lot about this already in the news, about, you know, gender issues when you're naming your bots. For those of you who are new to this and may not know it, maybe I'll quote once again other Stanford professor, Brave and Nuss, who in 2015, they showed that people respond to computers' gender along stereotypical lines. So it's actually problematic for you to name a bot. You have to put thoughts into it. Because male voices interfaces are rated more competent and persuasive for technology purposes, while female voices interfaces were viewed as more knowledgeable in terms of love and relationship and home taking and caring. So in 2011, so Nass died now, but this was one of his last interviews for CNN. He said, it's a well-established phenomena that the human brain is developed to like female voices better. And that's actually because as a society, we have been conditioned to expect female voices for helpful tasks and male voices for voices of authority. So what do we do so what do we do now that we have to name a bot? So many founders in my network have been debating with this, and I think there's always two coins to any conversation. But on one side, there's kind of pressure to conform to the prejudices of the world when you're trying to make a commercial hit. So a lot of people went ahead and named a chatbot with a female voice. And for example, you have Tay and Cortana over here. They're presented as female. You have Echo, Alexa, and Google Assistant with female personas. And even Apple's default mode of Siri has a female voice. And I wonder if you actually have also noticed that these humanized digital assistants use audio voices from Western educated voice talent. So there's also kind of the stereotype here as well. And so the two things that we see what's happening here is essentially first that we're reinforcing sexism, and the second thing that we're seeing is that we're teaching biases to AI. But the answer is not simply to just give a bot a male name, because for different contexts, depending on what your bot is doing, a male voice will be counterproductive to it. So you really have to see what is the purpose of your bot, who's going to be using it, and what will be the best voice and the best gender to give it. And also, with Ophi, we decided to go and make it genderless, Ophi, right? But the problem with this is that there's actually research showing that people really, really want to know who are they talking to and what's the gender associated to the bot. And secondly, there will be a time in the conversation where the user will prompt that question and say, what gender are you? So you have to come up with a solution for that. And here I want to just show you X.AI. Maybe you already know about it, but it's this meeting scheduling AI, and essentially what they did to solve the solution is, first of all, they have two genders of the bots, Amy and Andrew, and second of all, they're doing genderless text. So they're really trying to avoid the situation. So going back to reinforcing biases in AI, it's so relevant today because we train our system on massive data sets widely for everything from chatbots to image captioning systems. And if these data sets are biased, then we have really, really big problems. And in fact, last November, the MIT Technology Review has published these findings that computers are inheriting gender bias implanted in language data sets. So basically, the word programmer was associated with the word man, and the word woman was associated with a homemaker. And this is a big problem that we don't want. So, next one, sorry? Yeah, thanks. There's a New York Times article that was specifically published on this theme about unintentional biases in AI, and these are some examples that they found of the problems that we're experiencing today. So Google Photos generates automatic labels to pictures, and users caught the app labeling black people as gorillas, and then Asian people as blinking. And Google's ad advertising shows higher paying jobs to men instead of women. So that's a problem for us. And the problem is that people always expected for some reason that AI was unbiased, and that's just wrong, because if you're training it on data sets that are biased and then you're training it on human culture, which is biased, you will come up with these things. So I hope you're understanding that today we're not only trying to build a fun technology, we actually have to be mindful about the way that we're designing it. Because the lesson that I'm trying to teach is that human biases become computer biases. And personality And personality is actually really key. We need personality to make sure that people connect with our bots, but you have to be careful about how you assign personality. And if you decide not to assign personality, you're running into the mistake that people, remember anthropomorphism. People actually project human traits onto everything that they're doing. Next slide. Yeah, so let's talk about personality. In order for brands to engage through bots and ultimately see conversions, quality conversations have to be made and have to have a kind of emotional experience. And if you do a good job at creating a personality for a bot, it will basically boost two of our favorite metrics, engagement and retention. And I'm not sure if you actually knew this, but Google is even hiring creatives to bring humor and storytelling to human-computer interactions. And Microsoft, for Cortana, they hired poets, they hired screenwriters, playwrights, and novelists for this job. But how personal do we want the relationship to be? And of course, we don't want to run into the problem of Samantha from the movie Her, although it clearly points to the fact that it's entirely possible to feel a sense of intimacy with the virtual creation, and that's because we people are not able to discount social representation as unreal just because they appear on the screen. So the point here is that we have to set some kind of boundaries because from what I learned creating Ophi, it's actually going to affect your bottom line. So the two most important personality traits that I found super useful were empathy and humor. Empathy because we humans like to feel that someone else is empathetic towards us. And an interesting fact that I found is that men were more interested to having empathy in our chatbots versus women who deemed it unnecessary when performing tasks. But both really, really liked humor. And humor is pervasive in social relationship. Most common ways to produce a positive effect is actually through humor. And the best form of humor is actually innocent humor because it increases likability, boosts friendships, and fosters social cohesion. Yeah, so don't do these types of humor. Sorry, I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to slide this. Next one. This is an example of a good joke, perhaps, that you would like to try with your users. And the good jokes will actually reflect on the ratings of your app, and actually people will think that your bot has better social skills than it actually does. Next slide. However, the other thing that I wanted to quickly talk about is that you don't want to really abuse the bots. You don't want actually users to be able to abuse the bot. If the bot tells jokes, it doesn't mean that if someone tries to, say something mean to it, or even, say I'm going to kill you or something, that nothing should be happening. Right now, if you look at, next slide. Right now, if you look at the technology, what it's essentially doing is that every wish is our command, right? We don't have to say please or thank you to the bots, and you already see news where, children are playing with Siri and calling it stupid when it's not performing the right command at the right time. So there's this kind of ethical question we're addressing. Are we going to end up inhibiting the very evolution that we don't want to inhibit? And what we're actually ending up doing is reinforcing the master and slave relationship. And there's this philosopher of technology, Mark, from Belgium. He is actually warning us, saying that the slave dialect that we're creating makes humans vulnerable, alienated, and automated masters. So of course we cannot just respond back. Let's always remember Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotic. And we should have some kind of profanity recognition established. So the developer, when he sees abuse, he should not be just ignoring it. There should be either a neutral response of like, I'm sorry, I don't understand your question. If it's really, really bad abuse, you actually should have a report function to send it to the right authorities. And then, if, for example, if the bot is learning how to abuse the user, if you have really good machine learning algorithms, then you really should be establishing some kind of like end of a chat phenomena where if the bot starts abusing the user, on the other hand, then I, as a user, can terminate the conversation. And actually, anthropomorphism can be really useful in this case because anthropomorphism will create a sense of empathy with the user. So just the last risk that I really quickly wanted to talk about was about, the way that we're creating bots. If you created a bot that has great functionality, has a great personality, essentially what you're achieving is you're creating much better trust with the user. And when you're creating trust, users are more likely to provide even more information to the bots. So that means that you have a lot of data collected, and that's great because you can use this data to provide even stronger and better chatbots than there is. But for me, the word that comes into my mind when I see data is power. Because when we have data, we can do essentially anything, right? But how should we figure out, how to do what we should be doing with the data and how to set a moral framework for this? Let's do a quick experiment right now, just a rise of hands, and I think you will have a strong opinion about this. Those of you who prefer iPhones, put your hands up. Those of you who prefer Android? Fantastic, great, yay for Android. Okay, let me ask you a next question, which is a little bit harder. When trying to evaluate what we should do in this case of a moral framework, are you more likely to use the Kantian or the Millian moral framework? Kant? Mill? Okay, you see, this is terrifying because you have a better opinion about which phone you like than about the moral framework that you would like to use on your technology. Well, let me just quickly introduce you about this brilliant guy. He's been dead for 2,500 years, and he's been trying to put math into this problem. You remember Plato? You probably were sleeping during that class, but you know, he was a great philosopher. And the other philosopher was Aristotle. He thought that what Plato was thinking was so impractical. He actually thought that ethics was a matter of making decisions in the here and now, using our best judgment to find the right path. And then there's Mill. He thought utilitarian model was the best. Essentially, it was maximizing pleasure versus minimizing pain, and if the overall effect was not that bad, then let's go ahead with to do this. Since this is like thousands of years of debate, I'm not going to go further in this, and I have to really wrap up my presentation. But what I'm trying to say is that there isn't really a formula, and there isn't either a solution right now, because this is a problem of ethics, and ethics is hard, and it requires thinking, and thinking is quite uncomfortable. But we're the ones who have to do it, because technology grows more advanced, and bots will be increasingly capable of manipulating users. And it will ultimately be a balancing factor between ways to deal with these concerns versus restricting research and development and the future production of technology based on these concerns. So we don't want to hinder future of technology based on that. And if bots could reproduce the essential human characteristics, the level of sophistication can actually alter our understanding of informed consent because of their ability to improve persuasiveness with the users. And actually, this is already, if you have been to the Chatbot Summits in Berlin, maybe you have already seen this. This is Sarah by Justin Cassell. He's the director of human-computer interaction at Carnegie. And essentially, Sarah is already having a lot of volumes of sensitive data. Cassell studies ways for bots to use social cues and insights and small talk to persuade the user to give more information. And they actually also using computer vision to see how the reaction of the user is. And the bots adapt to how the reaction is. And this is kind of like blurring the lines between ethics because they're becoming really, really persuasive and good at doing this. And this is just about surveillance and privacy in the workplace because it also affects that. And if you want to find a solution for that, I would just consider Googling privacy by design. Next slide. Sorry, I'm running out of time. In many ways, essentially, we're seeing a response to the naive optimism of the earlier days. And right now, we're actually facing an unfamiliar challenge. Our work looks onto the future, but in embracing machine learning, we find ourselves tied to our age-old problems of the past. And in the industry, we really need more research on how to understand how to do this. We really need a framework to set for all of us developing the technology of tomorrow. And the key thing that I want you to take away today is that we really need awareness and vigilance, because if we want to create AI to be superior to human intelligence, every one of us is responsible for preventing the worst traits of slipping into machine learning. And the good news is that we have the power and we have the duty to figure it out, and we're all very smart people and we can determine how this will all end for us. Thank you.